Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Got a little bit of a dry video here today. So we're going to be talking about a check engine light that came on the car at the track. Going through the data on the telemetry system to kind of verify if we have a problem, and then kind of covering kind of like a hypothesis about what might be going on wrong, and then how we can kind of double check or try to understand if we are right about what's happening. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit dry, but if you have a fuel system similar to this in your car and you're experiencing a similar type of code, then it may be interesting to you. Okay, so the code in question here, as you can see on screen, is P023F fuel pump secondary circuit open. Typically, this code happens on cars that have either failing fuel pumps or fuel pumps like aftermarket pumps, or I guess stock or OE fuel pumps that are installed incorrectly and are leaking. And I think it pops up because when it's leaking, the pump is working harder to supply the amount of pressure that is required, and it's drawing more current than is expected. And so the fuel pump controller module will sense this and tell the ECU to throw an error code. So this is the code that I've been getting in the car, and you know, we really shouldn't be seeing this because this car has a radium in-tank basket and then a surge tank, right? The way the car is currently wired, I've got two fuel pump controller modules, one for the in-tank basket pump and one for the surge tank pump. The in-tank basket pump, or the fuel tank basket pump, is the one that communicates back to the ECU. So right away it tells me that there's probably something going on with the basket pump or the lift pump for the surge tank, but I do want to make sure that everything else in the fuel system is working properly, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is look at fuel pressures. And just so if you're not familiar with Laguna Seca, as I run my kind of cursor over here, you can see that red dot up here. This is the last turn of Seca onto the front straight. This little kink here is turn 1, and this is turn 2, where this dot is right now. This is all slightly sloped uphill. There's a large crest here and then downhill, and typically you're starting in second gear all the way to the top of fourth before you hit the brakes. And it's wide open all the way. Car hits about 117 before getting on the brakes. So where the check engine light is being thrown is somewhere over this crest and into this braking zone. I don't know if like what is happening in that exact moment is causing the check engine light, or if it's happening a little further back and that it's only until here where the check engine light comes on. I don't know. But what I'm going to be looking at here is the fuel pressures. So the first fuel pressure I'm looking at is F filter P. This is the pressure of fuel coming off of the surge tank after the fuel filter. So most fuel filters will cause a pressure drop across the filter. So 51 psi is what we're looking for at idle. That may or may not change at load. And then LPFP is a low pressure fuel pump. Low pressure fuel pressure. That is pressure coming off the hard line in the engine bay. So from the fuel filter in the back of the car, it'll run through a bunch of hard lines underneath the car and then pop up at the front of the firewall. And that is the pressure at that point. Just so you know, F filter P is a value, or is a smooth value. So it's typically more spiky, but the telemetry system is applying like an average to it. And then LPFP is unsmooth, so it's going to look a lot spikier. But as you can see here, coming through the straight over the crest, all of the pressures look pretty much where they should be, around 51 psi. So that really tells me that the surge tank is working. There's no problem with the fuel pump there, and then all the way up to the firewall, the pressure is what we expect it to be, right? So the next thing moving forward, we can look at the high pressure fuel pump. So this is a direct injection engine, and I can look at the high pressure fuel pump going into the high pressure rail for the engine. So what I can pull is HPFP and then fuel pressure target. Okay, so fuel pressure target, that is a fuel pressure defined by whatever table that's inside the ECU. So however the tuner has it set, that is a fuel pressure target that the ECU is looking for. And then the HPFP, or high pressure fuel pressure, is what is actually being pumped out. It's the pressure that we're seeing off that pump. Should be about plus or minus 400. And I don't know if this is PSI. I'm going to guess it's PSI, but let's just say 400 units, right? So here you can see across that start finish, going across into turn one. So I'm looking over here, going into turn one, and then into the braking zone. My targets are around 2,700. And the actual values that we're getting are just about 200 to under 200 or at target, right? Or sometimes we're spiking a little bit above it, but well within that kind of 400 unit range. And then here it drops way off. That's because I get off the throttle, and you can see the fuel pressure starts to drop. There's a little bit of residual pressure there, but it drops. So I've sort of confirmed at this point that pressure off the surge tank, pressure on the firewall, and pressure going into the high pressure fuel rail are all as expected. So we've got no problem here. The last thing I'm going to look at is the AFR. So once the fuel is burned, are we getting the AFR that we expect at the wideband? And I think my car, I think, kind of targets like low 11s, mid to low 11s, somewhere around there for AFR. And that seems to be the case, right? So through the start finish, across start finish, over turn one, over the crest, and into the braking zone, and where I get off the throttle here, all the AFRs look good. They look like what we expect them to be. And then you can see AFR goes super lean because I'm off throttle, goes to 22. So that tells me, again, kind of in summation, surge pump, good. Pressure at the firewall, good. Pressure at the high pressure fuel pump going into the motor, good. And then the combustion that's happening in the motor is coming out the way we expect it to, so that's good. So in this instance, we kind of confirmed, because the fuel pump controller module that can throw the code to the ECU is in the fuel tank basket in the fuel tank, that is probably associated with that particular pump, and we've confirmed that everything else looks good. And I spoke to Corbin Johnson, who I think has done several cars using kind of the same kind of template that I've used to wire my car and to control the two fuel pumps. He said that this code comes up occasionally and that you should just remove it or disable this code. And my tuner, Josh Dank at Dank Tuning, he said the same thing, and he's actually sent me a new revision of the tune that has this code disabled. The theory of what is going on here is what I think is happening, or at least my hypothesis of what is happening, is that I'm coming out of the last turn on the track, and it's a very long straight. We're going all the way through second, through third, through fourth, wide open throttle, and it's happening when the car has quarter tank, a little less than half a tank, somewhere around there. And because we're accelerating, that fuel is sloshing back away from the radium basket, because the hole for the basket is in the front, facing the front of the car. We're sloshing the fuel back under acceleration, and we're pumping all the fuel out of the basket. And I think that basket cannot fill up fast enough, right? So we're pumping it out. The level in the fuel basket is low, relatively low, as we're accelerating all the way up the front straight, and there's not enough fuel in the fuel tank to have it fill that basket back up. And so that pump begins to surge, right? Fuel comes in, it can pump it, and all of a sudden the fuel level drops and the pump surges again because there's nothing there, and so it spins up and it's causing a current spike. And that current spike, I think, may be outside of the window that fuel pump Subaru has defined for that fuel pump controller. Controller freaks out and it throws a check engine light. The other thing that may be happening, because we're getting this check engine light over the crest and down into turn one, it may have something to do with not just the acceleration, but maybe the negative G's that we're getting as the car comes up and over the crest. And then potentially maybe it also has something to do with the braking. Right? Maybe we are depleting all of the fuel and then we're slamming on the brakes. And again, that radiant basket has the opening in the front, and it actually has a ball that's designed to fly forward and block the hole under braking to keep fuel in the basket, and so it doesn't escape under braking. The issue is if we're eating all that fuel up and then we're slamming on the brakes and that ball is flying forward, if there was an opportunity for the fuel tank to refill that basket because of the fuel level under braking, it's not going to happen because that ball is blocking that hole. So it could happen in like one of three places, either under the acceleration, over the crest, or in the braking zone. And we're not really sure. I'm not really sure which one it is. Additionally, like I think it doesn't just happen if current spikes. It has to spike for a specific amount of time. So it could be that it's spiking all the way up and down this front straight, and finally that delta T, or that duration, hits over here in the braking zone, and that's when the check engine light gets thrown. So I'm not entirely sure, but that's the hypothesis as to what is happening. So one of the things we could do that was suggested by Simon, one of my EE friends, was install a shunt resistor and measure the current that the pump is drawing. So when the tank is full and it's not sloshing fuel around, and we would expect to see a very steady current, relatively speaking, right? Because the pump always has fuel to pump. And so it'd be like a steady line across the screen. And then the theory, if the hypothesis holds true, as the fuel starts to slosh around in the basket and the pump has fuel and doesn't have fuel, we'll now start to see the current spike up and spike down and spike up and spike down. So that is one way for us to kind of confirm that is what is happening. Another way would be to simply just read the pressure coming off of that in-basket fuel pump, right? And we can see if that pressure again is like spiking up and spiking down. Those aren't going to tell us what scenarios or where that CEL light or that check engine light is actually triggered. It's just going to help us understand, oh, when this happens at this pump, that's roughly when the check engine light comes on. But in reality, we don't really have to do this. This is just for the sake of curiosity, to kind of like understand what's going on. And maybe if I do have some free time, I'll wire something like this up, or maybe install another pressure sender. But the good part is that we've confirmed that there isn't a problem with the car, and that we can go ahead and just remove that code or turn it off. Yeah, so again, I think that is it. It's a little bit dry, but hopefully if you have a car that has a fuel setup similar to this, or you're experiencing something like this on the track, it might give you some insight into what is going on potentially with your car. Yeah, I mean, or you maybe you actually just have a fuel pump that's improperly installed or incorrectly installed. This isn't the first time we've gone on track with this setup. It's just the first time this code has popped up, and I think it's very unique to Laguna Seca. Additionally, if you guys are more familiar with fuel pumps and fuel pump controllers and when this code might happen, please don't hesitate to share. This is a learning process for me, so if there are people out there who are more knowledgeable and can shed some light on what's going on, would really appreciate it. And yeah, I think that is it. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you at the next video. Take care, guys.